Finally. You know, these things happen every so often. It's the first for me this year. So I've done a number of these to know that sometimes technology can be complicated. So, but that presents an opportunity. The opportunity here is for us to think about our mindset about it. So I had a little PowerPoint prepared for you with a couple of things that I wanted to share, but we can do that at some point. Maybe I'll forward that for that to be shared. But the idea is to exchange some thoughts about a very important topic that might be of your interest. It has a lot to do with how your mindset is in respect to being or not an entrepreneur. And so basically, the topic today was about entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship from the perspective of whether you have the mindset to be an entrepreneur. So the first question I'll ask is, do you think entrepreneurs are born or are made? Anyone can just a thumbs up, or which other way? Do you think they're born, or you think entrepreneurs are made? So let's talk about developing an entrepreneurial mindset. And by the way, these opinions are my opinions, or from research I've done. It has nothing to do, or they are not Dominican University's opinions. That's just my disclaimer. So today I briefly want to talk about, let's define what an entrepreneur is. Then maybe let's talk about the qualities that make a person a successful entrepreneur. And then let's talk about the entrepreneur mindset. And so, and then maybe a few tips on how to become an entrepreneur. And basically boils down to also thinking about learning about some skills. So I had asked you whether entrepreneurs you believe are born or made. So this is always a question. In general, people think that entrepreneurs are born, right? So, but if we think about an entrepreneur, and this defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is one who organizes, manages, and assumes the risk of a business or enterprise. So that sounds like someone who's well prepared to be able to carry on with organizing something, assuming risks, and then building something with it. So, but this really boils down to a number of myths. First of all, there's a lot of myths in our environment, our society. We think that entrepreneurs make more money than everyone. We also think that it is essential to be original and creative to become an entrepreneur. Another myth is that we believe that entrepreneurs are very much risk takers. Another myth is that it does take a lot of money to start a business, for example. And the most relevant of all the myths is the one I started the question with first, which is that people believe that entrepreneurs are born. While all of those are really myths, they are just not true. So let's talk about the 10 qualities that a successful entrepreneur has. And this is, there are a lot of research. One of the pointed research that has really developed a good set of 10 qualities is Gallup poll, which they follow over 2 million entrepreneurs over a course of many, many years. And so they follow, in addition, 1,000 successful entrepreneurs of all those 2 million that have been, successful for over some period of time. Because as you know, entrepreneurs, as they start, eventually, not all of them make it to the next level or even years down the road. So the 10 qualities they have concluded that the most successful entrepreneurs have is, first of all, they have a focus, particularly a very much business focus. Second, they all have self-confidence. They tend to have some level of creativity. They know how to delegate or find resources. They are determined. They're independent. They have a thirst for learning. They tend to be promoters of their business, their ideas. They tend to develop human relationships. In other words, they are good and learn the skill of relating to people. And finally, they are willing to take risks. So those are the 10 qualities that make a successful entrepreneur. But if I look at what are the things that successful entrepreneurs do? Well, first of all, they learn how to clearly explain the competitive advantage of the offer or the value proposition that they bring to the table to whoever their audience or their customers are. They also have a very much mindset with the customer in focus, the customer in mind, or who their audience is when they make decisions. The other thing is they tend to plan for growth. In other words, they think about sort of, maybe they might have a vision, they might have a a way to think about objectives, but then they think, how do I get there from point A to point B? And that's a plan. Another thing is they tend to link responsibilities of those goals that they've thought of, they came up with, to specific people, specific individuals that can be part of their idea or their enterprise. They also tend to put people that support them, like employees or collaborators or so, in particular roles that fit the strengths of what their plan needs. So in other words, they have a plan and they can actually bring people that help them into those pieces or components of that plan. So when I think about the mindset of an entrepreneur, in other words, the mind of an entrepreneur, I think of something like this. So a person that walks down the street and maybe sees something, but instead of thinking that's just something that is physically there, thinks about, is there something that can be improved or done about that thing? Say you walk down the street and you see, something that is just not doing much, and then maybe it's about garbage. And you think, well, can we do something about it? Can we just pick it up or put something so where people do not throw it on the street, but they have a container where to put it? That's as simple as thinking an opportunity. It's thinking there's an opportunity for that to happen. So that doesn't mean they will necessarily do something about it, but it depends on their level of excitement they find in the opportunity. So it really boils down to think about an opportunity and moving into some level of action. And an action now starts to think or involve a plan. And then when you have a plan, you might end up with a certain level of results. So this process of seeing things as opportunities, taking action, and then looking at results is really an attitude mindset. So it's really the attitude about that full cycle in an entrepreneur's mind. And you would think, but all of us sort of think of those things that way. Well, there's a difference, because an entrepreneur, and this is Peter Drucker said, and he's a well-known business, he's written many books, and actually in business school, you study a lot about his models. And he always said that an entrepreneur always looks for change, responds to it, and exploits it as an opportunity. So there lies the key in what an entrepreneur, how different an entrepreneur thinks. So I've looked at this in the perspective that there are some conscious behavior patterns that take place in a person, right? If something is activated, meaning you're attracted to, let's say, an opportunity because you see something that can be innovative or it can be created, you can bring some value to something, then this drives an inference. In other words, I conclude something can be done. That's an inference. And then maybe I get excited about it, or maybe I don't. But if I do get excited, then I bring perspective and enthusiasm about what I found, that opportunity. And at that point, maybe I think of possibilities. And if I think about possibilities, then maybe I can think about results. There's a possibility that this could be done better. Okay, that could be the result. Therefore, what it needs is action. And maybe I don't take the action, but the mindset of an entrepreneur will sort of follow that cycle in which there is that activation of that opportunity, thinking about it, coming up with a perspective, thinking it as possibility, and then moving to action. So simply said, this is as if you have a burning desire that is triggered by what you see. That's the opportunity. And then this triggers an emotion. This is a feeling. This is something I can do about. And then this turns into adrenaline in your system, adrenaline that you get excited about doing that. Not necessarily, sometimes it might be about the very thing you're looking at, but sometimes it might just be about the opportunity of taking the steps to do something about it. And that becomes a stimulant to your mind, sort of like a mind game, right? I get stimulated by those things, and therefore now I'm taking the action, or I am willing to take the action. At a personal level, I was never thought myself as an entrepreneur, but I thought of myself as someone who wanted to be a business professional, major in economics, eventually a graduate degree in finance and all that. And I went into banking. And so banking is a very bureaucratic, the industry in banking is, financial services tend to be huge institutions in which they don't necessarily thrive on people, working on entrepreneurial efforts, but you work in teams. So at some point, in my career early on, I realized there were some issues that could be resolved when we improve with technology. And I brought those ideas to, let's say, my superiors. And my superiors thought, maybe that's a good idea. I wanted to explore it. And then came back with a plan to implement it. But the whole process was exciting me in terms of getting emotional, getting excited about that opportunity, that was happening in my mind, but I never thought myself as an entrepreneur. Not until much later in my career, when there were some opportunities. For example, this is 16, 17 years ago, when with some colleagues and friends that were doctors, we saw an opportunity that there are kids out there that, are born with lower extremity deformities. So at the time, the doctors my friend doctors were thinking, and these are orthopedic doctors, if we were to do surgeries in these kids that don't have the means to get this done, we could probably help and eventually they could be walking. Because a child that is born with a lower extremity deformity cannot walk. And therefore, without the surgery, they will never walk. And they'll be using prosthetics or being in a wheelchair and so forth. And of course, that's a very different quality of life than someone who can walk. And so at the time, I thought, that's exciting. If we could just do that. And by the way, growing up where I grew up, I saw kids that couldn't walk and adults that obviously that had those conditions. So therefore, I thought that was exciting. And maybe we can do something. What I could do at the time was I can put together a business plan. And I put together a business plan for 5 years. And I said, this is what we can achieve in 5 years. This is where we could get the funding and we could do this. Well, that has become a foundation. For 16 years, we've been doing work in which we bring a team of doctors to Mexico, and we treat kids from all over. We brought kids from Colombia, Nicaragua, Peru, Argentina, and of course, many from Mexico, from rural areas, poor kids that don't have the resources. At that point, I realized this idea excited me. There's something we're doing about it, and I feel great about doing that work, which is obviously nonprofit work. But then I started to see myself as someone who could actually do something entrepreneurial, because it really boiled down to that desire that was triggered, that emotion that it generated in me, the adrenaline of doing it, and being stimulated by it, and of course, taking action. And that's the difference of what an entrepreneur is. I'm not saying that I'm an entrepreneur or innate or any of that, because by the way, only about 37% of every group of population you will have this type of feeling on an ongoing basis and see things as opportunities. And that's why when we see those, we think entrepreneurs are born, but that's not the case. Actually, almost 70% of people are not necessarily, they learn to be entrepreneurial. And so when you think about that, you realize that a person can see a problem as a human being, right? We all human beings see problems. But the question is, do you think of a solution to a problem? And if you think of a solution, maybe you could put out a vision. You have a vision how that problem could be solved. And then if you go out and do something about it, that to me is the definition of an entrepreneur, someone that actually implements and does something. And that process is not only exciting, but also the pieces, the components of this, or the stages, the phases of going through it are exciting. So at the heart of an entrepreneur, I think, is that sense. And in the words of Siputra, the heart of an entrepreneur can beat freely in anyone. I really believe that. I really think if you're working for a large corporation, if you're working for an institution where you are, a little, cog in between all this machinery of things that you have to do, well, what about if you think of yourself as an intrapreneur within the organization, and you bring ideas and you think of solutions that excites you, and bring a plan or research how to put together that. Now, in business school, of course, we delve a lot on this. How do you become an entrepreneur? In business school at Brennan, the Brennan School of Business, we have actually an entrepreneurial major. So what we really talk about is providing the skill sets that entrepreneurs can actually implement. And this is the business acumen, bringing all this, topics related to business to be able to do. But what I will say, in addition to that, even independent from that, I think to develop that entrepreneurial mindset that we all at heart have is to really learn. And by this, I don't mean you need to learn about putting out goals or really just engaging the right talent or thinking about objectives only. Yes, all that's great. But what I really mean by learning is a certain way of thinking, a way you approach challenges and mistakes, a way to develop an inherent need to improve your skill set and try it again, because there's going to be failure, there's going to be errors, and from there you learn. You see, that's a whole mindset. It's a mindset about how I go about the things that I see, and do I really see them as opportunities? And people ask me, so how do you get to become really thinking of opportunities and things? Well, you have to expose your mind, yourself, to other things beyond what you do every time. So one of the things that I realize is, for example, art is a great source of inspiration and creativity. I know I don't necessarily, are an artist, but I enjoy music, I enjoy art like most of you or all of you do. So if you were to take some time as part of your life every week or once a month to expose yourself to more of that, whatever that is, whether it's painting, whether it's music, whether it's any other type of art, fine arts, whether it's dance, whatever, you're already getting yourself out of your routine and starting to develop certain areas in your brain that will trigger creativity. So creativity can be brought in so many ways. So what I'm really saying is, how do you get anywhere if you've never been there? Well, you do these things. How do you get today somewhere? Well, you turn on your GPS. You look at a map that tells you a little bit of the what, the how, and the who. So in other words, the next thing you need to do if you're driving somewhere and you already got the GPS set to go and gives you the route, you just need to put enough gas in the car to get there. And what's that gas at a personal level? That's what motivates you. There must be something that motivates you. And you have to find what that is so that that's your gas. And now that you have the GPS, you can seek the possible support to identify what that, those strengths that you might have to maximize and exploit them. To me, that's a way to think about becoming or expanding your entrepreneurial heart, your entrepreneurial mindset. In a way, it's like thinking about the basics. First of all, for example, if you think what is the most important attribute that anyone should have, an entrepreneur, of course, well, it would have to be integrity. It would have to be honesty. That's obviously a very important asset of an entrepreneur. But beyond that, it's developing these other skills and those skills that are useful to you. So I think what I would recommend is you have to think about, learn to understand your pattern of behavior. What is that behavior? Is it conscious or unconscious? Are you consciously thinking, when you're learning something, you're doing it conscious? For example, since childhood, you were taught to brush your teeth. That was a conscious decision by your parents, whoever took care of you, for you to get used to doing this. And they say it takes about 90 times before a child learns something. You can take up to 90 times or less, obviously, to try every day, remind you every day you have to do this until it becomes unconscious. Today, you wake up before you go to bed, I'm sure you just, without thinking, you go and brush your teeth. That has become an unconscious habit. But before, at some point in your life, that wasn't. So that was learned. So the other thing is, you think about your strengths and weaknesses. And if I were to ask you, do you want to work on your strengths or your weaknesses? By default, we tend to think that it's best to work on our weaknesses. That way we can improve them. I would say no. Work on your strengths. Make them even sharper. And that's how you will find, those skills, or you'll shine or sharpen, rather, those skills that will be useful in all efforts you're trying to do. So really boils down to thinking about in which zone are you? And by zone, I mean, we tend to be in our comfort zone. You define the comfort zone as an area where you feel comfortable. You've learned it, you know that. But then the fact that you're learning, the fact that you're hearing this talk, or you're attending classes, you're going to school, you're trying to expand that comfort zone. And sometimes when you expand that comfort zone, you come to a point where you get to a zone that gets a little uncomfortable. This is stuff that you haven't heard. You're being challenged on your thinking. You're being challenged on what you know. And maybe even in classes, for example, you now have to take tests. The panic zone, where you are thinking, oh, now I have to really demonstrate what I know. Yeah, so you move from your comfort zone to that uncomfortable zone, and then to that panic zone. Once you surpass that panic zone, you conquer it. Now you have a broader zone. In my mind, that's the extraordinary zone. And you keep expanding. So what was your comfort zone has expanded, and now your comfort zone is much broader. And so the question is, can you continue doing that? Yes, you can. And so watch what zone you're in. So the first thing was understand your behavior pattern. Second, dwell or look into your strengths and improve them. The third one is look at what zone you're in. And then start thinking about your own entrepreneurial profile. And let me talk about that next. And the other thing would be, think what skills you should learn, right? In business, we know there's business acumen that you can definitely acquire to be someone who runs a business. So if I were to mention about the types of, or how to grow in these areas, I have to mention a couple of things. I have to say that it's an error to believe that everyone can learn to be competent in everything. You can't be competent in everything. I know I can multitask, I can do this, but the reality is, and there's lots of studies that show that when you multitask, you're really going over across the mean. You're really boiling down everything into the mean, as opposed to succeeding in something. So, but if you focus on something, you can actually do much better than just the mean. So it's true that talent is permanent and is unique, but that does not mean it cannot be developed further. And if you have some talent, then that's the talent you want to develop even further. Another error is to think or assume that the greatest room for growth is that of weakness, as I said earlier. Focus on your weakness and improve it. No, it's about focusing on your strengths, in my opinion. And finally, to think that the maximum growth potential is really your greatest strength. So when you think about those comfort zones, the comfort zone, the zone of learning, the zone of panic, and then the broader zone of, which I call the zone extraordinaire, it's about expanding that zone on an ongoing basis as much as you can. So in the words of Robin Sharma, as you move out of your comfort zone, what was previously unknown and scary becomes your new normal. That's growth. And so in terms of thinking your profile, what's your profile as an entrepreneur? Think about this. Are you more a builder? Are you more a go-getter? Are you more a specialist? Or are you more an innovator? Those are the 4 types of profiles in the model of Joe Abraham, who's built a model about understanding entrepreneurs and their mindset. Well, builders tend to be very much people that love to work in infrastructure. I realize I'm a builder. I love to put together a plan and analyze it, come back with the data and the facts. I love that. I'm a builder. But the weakness of a builder typically is building relations, human relations, friendships, networking. That's the weakness. And I know I'm an introvert. That's a little bit of my weakness. And I worked to some extent on that. That doesn't mean that because I know that's kind of my weakness, I will ignore it completely, because that's an important, actually. But on the other hand, I can also team up, and I have teamed up with people that are better at that. Another profile is someone who's a go-getter. And those are the ones that get the most, let's say, recognition, because they tend to be very optimistic. They tend to be, determined. I am doing this, I follow that, I go after it, I don't care. But the problem with those, and think about Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a go-getter. He's optimist. He comes back with ideas all the time. But one of the issues he has, one of the weaknesses he has, is he's inconsistent. As a matter of fact, Tesla, the company he founded, suffers from it, gets impacted because of his inconsistency, right? Yet he's been able to obviously raise enough capital to mitigate that to some extent. But if you were to look at the volatility of that company in terms of its stock price, it's almost directly related to the weight of that inconsistency. So that's the weakness of a go-getter in general, according to Joe Abraham. So another one I said is the specialist, someone who likes to delve into an area. And I'm a little bit like that, particularly when I was in banking and investment banking. I became in a few areas the subject matter expert, because I love to delve and get a deep dive into the analysis and really understand the facts and the material. But the weakness, and that was my strength, but the weakness of a specialist would be obviously showing that, or the sales part of it, or really bringing other people to understand that, right? So that's a weakness sometimes. Another profile of an entrepreneur is an innovator. And an innovator is someone mission-driven, someone who has an idea and follows it and is very determined as well. The problem with that sometimes, in one of the weakest areas, is that they are not good managers. They are mission-driven, but they sometimes don't know how to implement the structure that you need to get there. So when you think of that, like Carlos Slim, who's the owner of Telefónica in Mexico, and the biggest, let's say, the number one billionaire in Mexico, he talks about how all times can be good for those who know how to work and have what to do with it. So I say, that's great. If you know how to work and you are willing to put in the effort, the question is, you know what to do with it. And that's where you need some of the skills or develop that entrepreneurial mindset. So then, when I think about bringing an idea to a business, for example, and here's laying a little bit more of the business acumen. You might have the idea, the inspiration, see the opportunity and get inspired to do something about it. That's the idea phase. And that comes from maybe some creativity in terms of thinking, different, outside of the box, as we tend to say. So what you can apply here is, for example, the canvas model. In business, we talk about a canvas model, which is an analysis of who's your client, what's the value proposition, what are the weakest areas, what are the things you can do. That is a strong, tremendous tool to bring an idea and make it into a business idea. But there's the next phase, and this is the business planning. A business plan incorporates various aspects. A business model, meaning how it's going to function, how it's going to make money, how it's going to be financed, what's going to be the way you will bring the product or service to the market, and so forth. So a business plan. So from a business acumen perspective and entrepreneurial, that mindset that, yes, you develop it, you have to think about that there are tools out there that will help you bring that idea. And it doesn't necessarily have to be business. It could be in an ongoing company. It could be non-for-profit. It could be of so many kinds. So I really think creativity is learned as opposed to just, that you're just born with it. Because it's like learning how to read. It takes time. It takes a process as well. And it's about exposure more than anything. So if I were to narrow down in terms of the skills or the things from a business acumen perspective, there are 4 pillars in business that an entrepreneur must understand. One is the finance side of it. Obviously, being a finance person, I'm going to start with that one. But finance is important. Understand the financial structure. Have an idea what is the cash going to look like, what cash is needed to be able to run with this. It's like saying, do I have enough cash? Do I have enough gasoline to drive from point A to point B? That's very important, right? It's going to get you there or not. Then the relationships and the sales aspect of it. It relates to showing your value proposition or knowing how to communicate. The other aspect is thinking about a process, building a process, a structure, a system that works. If you have a product or a service, how do I systematize it? How do I make it so it's repeatable so I can bring it to customers? And finally, understanding and knowing my stakeholders. Stakeholders could be my vendors, my clients, my partners, the entire your community, understanding those 4 pillars. There's others, obviously, but those are the key in my mind. Understanding the financial side, the communication of your value proposition, which might be related to sales, the building of a process or a system, and then the stakeholders who are part of your ecosystem, so to speak. How do you get ideas? Well, you could start by going to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. There are 17 sustainable goals. With a Dominican look at them, and we try to incorporate it in terms of the learning from sustainability. And there's a list actually in the website of the UN about these goals with ideas that have worked and ideas that are needed in the world. That could be a start, because all of those ideas tackle good sustainable issues out there that need attention. So in short, it's really up to you to develop that entrepreneurial mindset. You will be better prepared to face everyday challenges if you think in that mode. You will also experience growth, obviously. And as I said, you don't just have to be an entrepreneur. You could be an intrapreneur within a company, with your organization. And then, of course, you can be an entrepreneur. It's about training. It's about doing those things and trying different things. And the reason you might not know is because you just didn't learn them. So it's up to you to go and seek them and learn them. So what are you going to do to have an entrepreneurial mindset? Well, I think my recommendation is you look at your response to life's fundamental opportunities. So look at opportunities. Do you see opportunities or not? If you're not seeing opportunities, then maybe it's time to, get more on and expose yourself outside of your comfort zone to other things where you're going to be looking at things from a different angle. And then it's commitment. It's commitment about changing or growing this mindset. And that boils down to tempering your character. In other words, what's your response to the uncertainties of life? And that's a key, 2 or 3 words, uncertainties of life. We live in uncertain times, and there's always been uncertainty. And the moment you embrace that, you realize that things are going to change anytime, and you have to embrace it, because we don't have control of a lot of things. So that uncertainty is a component of everything we do, and embracing that is a good step. Then lastly is change your old agreements, your old habits. I recommend you look at the book, read the book, The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. And it's a little 114-page book and it's in Spanish too, Los Cuatro Acuerdos, Miguel Ruiz, who talks about 4 basic little things if you change your mindset about integrating in your life and just giving up all old agreements. We all grow up with agreements. You have to do things the one way. You have to believe that. But if you just boil them down to basics. And finally, from a business perspective, of course, building or getting the business acumen, financial education for sure, getting mentoring, building a network where you have mentors, advisors, sponsors, advocates. Now, of course, you'll have colleagues. Colleagues, it's easy. Those you get easily. But it's the other ones. They have to be, make a conscious effort to get them, seek them, and get them. Because you want advice. You want those to be part of your tribe, so to speak, and you build that tribe. And that network is important. So anyway, in the words of Leonardo da Vinci, one cannot have no smaller or greater mastery than of oneself. Thank you.